Since the ceasefire, they're not really covering anything that's happening inside Iran. Over 700 dual nationals and foreign nationals have been arrested, and 6 of them so far have been executed as we speak now.
6 have been executed.
Already,
Do you know what
yeah.
nationality they are? I want to understand what this conflict means, the possibility of regime change.
So we haven't actually seen a return of the regime, but we haven't seen the victory from the anti-regime. We won. It's sort of like a stalemate right now. Every 10 years or so, there was a wave in Iran. Right now, as we speak, checkpoints everywhere. Some protests have started.
Have they?
Some. They used to bring in Hezbollah members to come to the streets and beat up the people. One thing that the media is not talking about, the support for the regime is probably around 5% rather than 20%. Going around slaughtering everybody because they're trying to find the Mossad agents. The intel that I'm getting, at least, is that 50,000 mosques have been closed down in Iran over the last few years.
Wait, hang on a second. They closed down 50,000 mosques.
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's going to be very messy, and this is why you don't really want Western boots on the ground. It's too messy. Because of my position, it's probably best not to have a conversation on a normal phone that could easily be tapped, for example.
What exactly is going on with your father?
I haven't seen him in years or so, 20 years almost. I've lost more hope than even before.
Before you hear from Mahyar Tousi, I ask if you want to support this show. All you have to do is press subscribe. If you do that, I can have more phenomenal guests like Mahyar Tousi exploring the issues you want to hear about that the mainstream media won't touch. And if you head over to winstonmarshall.co.uk, you will get exclusive footage and ad-free viewing. But without further ado, Mahyar Tousi. Mahyar Tousi, thank you so much for coming to sit down with me. You are, of course, a veteran in the new media game in Britain. Staggering numbers. Your show is having, it seems to me, a million views a day, especially since the Israel-Iran war broke out, Operation Rising Lion. This show, we've covered that war, that conflict in considerable detail, not least because I happen to be in Israel, so the audience will be familiar with what it was like on the Israel side. Mm-hmm. You being Iranian, you have family in Iran, you have original insight into what's actually going on in Iran, which is what I'm actually desperate to hear about. And not only that, you're telling me before we start shooting now, actually, the ceasefire, it's kind of bollocks because there's still stuff going on within Iran. I want to understand what's the true ethnic and social makeup of Iran before the conflict, what this conflict means, what the possibility of regime change, where is the Reza Pahlavi, the Crown Prince. All of that I'm hoping we can get into. But first, if I may, I'd love to know your personal story because although you're born in Iran, yep, you moved here, I believe, at a young age, and it wasn't long before the Ayatollah himself put a fatwa on your head. So I wonder if you might tell me that story.
Yes. So as you said, I was born in Iran. And when you're born in those type of countries where at the time, it's not like a North Korea sort of society. It's more like Russia, China, Iran, where there is tyranny. But, on the surface, it seems fine. Just as long as you behave, you're fine. But as a kid, you're told you have to be wired into current affairs. Your dad will teach you, you have to know what's in the news. Whereas in the West, relatively peaceful and prosperous countries, a lot of young people don't really know who the deputy prime minister is, for example. So that
you have to know for your own security.
Exactly. And my mother one day was chased by the morality police because her headscarf was slightly to the back, and she ran, and coincidentally the first door she found happened to be the British Embassy. And things escalated from there. Of course, then the British Embassy, in a very rare situation, tried to help her. Once she came to London, after about a year, I was 13, 14, so old enough, I moved legally as a kid. And then things changed. Obviously, then my life was here. As a kid, you don't like change. So I'm like, I've got to move my friends and everything else. Then you adopt and you kind of integrate. That's one of the things my mother told me, that always be grateful that this country, this generous nation, welcomed us in. It's your job to make them feel comfortable and integrate. It's not their job to make you as a newcomer feel welcome or comfortable. And But then obviously I did my own stuff. I got into politics eventually. It became political, part of the Tory party, and things were still quiet until my dad got into trouble because he was also a rebel. He's still in Iran, obviously. Only my mother came. And, he got into trouble a little bit. But then because I was in politics, they said that your son is now an MI6 Tory agent, so he's banned. So because I was a Tory, I'm clearly MI6. And so I was like, I don't really want to go back anyway. But I didn't really do much until I started making YouTube videos, which was completely irrelevant. I was talking about Brexit and British politics at first. Then the uprising started initially in 2019, then again in 2022, 2023. And when October the 7th happened, obviously my channel became more of a geopolitical news channel, and I covered everything from the Middle East. Then I realized around 2019, when the uprising started, when I covered it, there was a fatwa that was put on my head. They sent a letter to my dad, and which again, for those who are not fully familiar, fatwas are permanent and there's no expiry date. And it's basically like a bounty on your head. And whenever there is an opportunity, you could be taken out. But again, until that point, that wasn't my main problem. The main problem was my father and his safety. He keeps his head down. He has got his own business, but he's held by the IRGC. They took his passport away. He's not allowed. And my wedding is coming up soon. We were hoping for him to visit.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And that's been a little bit difficult, of course. So when recently the war broke out between Israel and Iran, people will be surprised to hear that my dad and people like my dad in Iran got excited because the Iranians are not revolutionary people. They're like the Brits. They're not like the French or the Arabs where they could actually get fiery and do something. So they've been helpless. And so they were looking forward to this because they knew that the state of Israel, if they have to do something, they will be doing targeted attacks. So they were looking forward to it. My father was like, yes, do it. And but obviously his his life is still in danger in Tehran. And as the bombs have been dropped, they had to evacuate the city. And I lost contact for a few days with him because they shut down not just the internet, but even the landline, phone numbers and everything else. Luckily, he survived that.
So this is around, now we're in the 12th of June, is the start of Operation Rising Line. So pretty much straight away you lost contact with your father?
Yeah, after a day or two, yeah. And then...
Is he in Tehran?
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you born in Tehran?
I was born in Tehran, in the center, yeah.
So you were raised in Tehran. Just before we go into what's currently going, just a couple of details. So did you start Tousi TV around 2018? So
it was the 2019, yeah.
2019. But, and 2019 is when you learn about the fatwa.
Well, that's when the initial uprising started, so I covered it. And then, then the fatwa was...
So you covered it on Tousi TV around 2018?
Yeah, but I didn't mention the fatwa at the time, though. That's because I was terrified.
Oh, you didn't want people to know about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
I've only mentioned it for the last probably like a year or so, when I realized that this is the end of the regime. And even though you might still say, well, that's a risky move because as they get weaker, they will get more desperate. But I think they have bigger problems than Mahyar Tousi. So,
well, I don't know. It sounds like you've been a bit of a thorn in their side, to say the least, particularly of getting your message, your ability to get a counter narrative to the regime's narrative out there. I think actually might be doing a better job than the Khomeini himself. But just to rewind a moment, because what was exactly were you doing with the Tories? You were just a party member, or were you sort of an activist, or?
Yeah, so I was an activist. I worked in Parliament for a Tory MP, and then I was quite...
Which MP?
It was Henry Smith, Crawley. Back, I don't know if he's still an MP. I don't think he's an MP.
Okay.
And but I was pretty active in the Tory party, and I actually, when you're a young Tory activist at a time, they tell you that there's only one way: you have to become an MP. So my plan was to become an MP. Luckily, that didn't go well. So
right, okay.
And then I kind of became less active and became more active in terms of the 2016 Brexit referendum, things like that. Then obviously things just changed, and I didn't really want to stay in politics. So I just had like normal jobs throughout my 20s over the last before, I'm now 37, until the age of probably around about 30, 31, when I started YouTube, and there was no plan. It was just alongside my job. Mm-hmm. It was just a hobby. And when people started listening to me, again, primarily about Brexit, then I realized, well, I'm a contrarian. I don't like authority, so I don't like to work for people. So I took a risk and I decided to make my own channel. And with that came a lot of good things. Independence, you have your business, and people like you, but the problem is some people hate you. And this is where things got complicated.
Politics and media is a perilous game. On the topic of conflicts in the Middle East, let's take a quick look at how the media is reporting on Trump's new Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal using ground news. Now, left-leaning Middle East Eye ran the headline, "Trump beware, enabling Israel to impose its will on the Middle East will backfire." We specifically partnered with Ground News because their app and website help me and my team cut through media bias and get the full picture on any story like this one. There are over 675 articles published on Trump's new Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal, and we can access every single one through Ground News, complete with source context and key breakdowns. Meanwhile, right-leaning The Express led with, "Trump announces Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal, but warns it will only get worse." Two very different narratives from left and the right. Seeing all sides, regardless of political lean, is essential to making informed decisions and spotting bias. That's why Ground News' blind spot feed, which highlights stories underreported by either side, is such a powerful tool. I genuinely believe in what Ground News is doing, and I ask you to check it out by scanning the QR code or visiting ground.news/Winston. If you subscribe through my link, you'll get 40% off unlimited access. Ground News is subscriber funded. So, by supporting my sponsors, you are also supporting this show. Can you just colour in the 2019... I have done a bit of it on this show. I had Mahyar on the show. But for people new to Iran as a story, as an issue, they might not know. Just can you give a quick description of that, a primer?
Yeah, so just a very quick summary just before that. At that point, every 10 years or so, there was a wave in Iran. So obviously, 79 was the actual, what I call paramilitary coup. The Islamic occupation happened. 10 years later, around 1989, just after the Iraq war stopped with Iran, there was a bit of a kind of uprising, but that was primarily done by the communists in Iran, and they were called the Mujahideen, and they were all slaughtered. And then 10 years later, in 1998, 1999, that was the first popular protest, which was students, and it was in opposition to a newspaper being closed down. It was very basic things. I think by that point, younger people in Iran were like, yeah, we have a normal country. We have to protest against the newspaper being shut down. They forgot that you live in basically North Korea. Then 10 years later, 2009, we had that infamous presidential election, which was rigged, and the Green Movement happened, and many people died. That's when Mahyar also left the country, came to the West.
What is the Green Movement?
So this was, again, young people in Iran, but still hopeful for some reason. And instead of having revolutionaries right now, we had reformists. And their candidate, Mousavi, who was still basically pro-Islamic Republic, but they were the reformists, and people had some hope that at least he could become president and he could, domestic policies, he could do more reforms, social reforms and all that. People were still in their own bubble that, I think it was a bit of a defeatism that the Islamic Republic is here forever, so let's just try and reform it from within. And then people realize, they don't even give us proper elections. They just rigged the election. And Ahmadinejad, who was a more kind of hardcore conservative candidate, pro-IRGC, won. And that's when the whole illusion was shattered in Iran. But again...
what illusion specifically is shattered? The idea that it can be reformed at all?
Yeah.
Okay, so they sort of give up.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting just to tie this. You say earlier that your father is very happy about what's going on, and you suggest it seemed implicit in what you're saying that a lot of Iranians are like that.
If not all, a big chunk, yeah.
That would be surprising to me, because one of the big shocks has been actually how popular the regime appears to be within Iran. You might tell me I'm completely wrong, but I mean, at the minimum, I've seen some reports that they only enjoy 20% popularity, but I've spoken to others who have said they enjoy up to 60% popularity. And this Ambassador Michael Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the States, told me that. And so actually, I was quite shocked. And given what we've seen, the sort of lack of spirit for regime change within Iran suggests to me that maybe they are more popular then.
No. So firstly, whether I say something right now or some sort of a former diplomat or some sort of analyst would say something, it is all still our instinct. So we don't have the exact paper saying this is the number, because we don't have access to Iran. You can never get an actual opinion poll. So it is all based on instinct. But my experience, and many people from this side, Iranians, would tell you the way we assess the popularity of the regime is on a couple of very obvious levels, because we know that this regime from day one is more about visibility. So when they had a few million people out at their rallies back in the day.
Which rallies? This is the Green Movement stuff?
No, the pro-regime, just rallies. Just in
the
general.
pro-regime rallies.
Yeah, back in the day, like years ago, decades ago, just a rally that they would do, for example, anniversary of the revolution. A lot of people would come out. So one thing to assess is, for example, even recently, they had the victory rally. They brought out about 5 to 10,000 people. You can see the actual evidence. The videos are there. The pictures are there at the square, which is the Engalab Square, which is not a major square. It's just regular size. We also do know that many of the Basij members, who are the militia of the IRGC, these are younger men, have cancelled their membership cards. They essentially defected. They posted this on social media, but that's not, again, the full evidence. 50,000 mosques have been closed down in Iran over the last few years, and this was also publicized. People can find it on Google. The Iranian government confirmed this because nobody's going to mosques, and the maintenance of it was so expensive, they had to close them down. I think they overbuilt it anyway.
Wait, hang on a second. They closed them. They closed down 50,000 mosques.
Yeah.
Why?
Because everything is symbolically connected. They're being pro-regime and being practicing Muslims. So while the former diplomats could also have their own opinion, I could also have the data that, and again, I will give you the information later. Off the top of my head, I forgot who did it. That less than 30% of Iran are practicing Muslim. Big chunk, obviously, say we don't have religion or we're atheists. A small chunk Christians or converting to Christianity, but they're becoming less Islamic, not just because of faith, but because they see it connected to the regime. They don't have the numbers anymore. If you ask people like myself and others, we would say the support for the regime is probably around 5% rather than 20%. And 5% out of about 90 million people is still a few million people. But they still only manage to bring up about 5,000, 10,000 people at a time, even to their own Friday prayers or a big victory rally. Where are their people? We've had, because we were talking about the 2019 uprising after 2009, the Green Movement, 2019 onwards, there was a pause because of COVID, obviously, and then 2022 again. What started was no longer political. It was a cost of living crisis uprising. You had poor people, you had the working class, you had people who would seem religious. They were on the streets with the liberal-minded people and the younger people. So it wasn't just a bunch of middle-class educated university students who were just saying, we want freedom, we want to be westernized. Everybody started to turn against the regime. Their own so-called supporters, who they were not IRGC members, they were supporters, because they were
in
told,
2022.
Yeah, that was when 2019 onwards it changed, and they started losing everybody because they can't even, back in the day, they used to bribe.
So if they lost their faith after the failure of the Green Movement in 2009, they regained it by 2022. Is that what you're suggesting?
The people, the anti-regime people, realized that reform can't happen, so they became more revolutionary. They wanted regime change. But in 2019, some of the more working class religious people who used to be by default pro-Islamic Republic, they were the ones who also came out. And since then, the working class, the poorer, more religious people, they're still religious, but they're now out. So they've lost even their own side.
Okay, so just forgive me if I'm being slow on one detail, but you say 50,000 mosques have been closed down by the regime.
Yeah, just
why would they close the mosque down?
Because the maintenance issues.
Oh, because it's too expensive to maintain.
Nobody was going. Yeah, nobody's attending the mosques.
Oh, I see.
That's that was just and they publish it themselves because they were just saying we have to reorganize our society.
Am I right in understanding that Iran has a much stronger middle class?
Yeah.
So this is what
in cities. Yeah.
In cities.
Yeah.
This is makes it quite distinct then from other Arab nations that surround it. So if you compare it to Afghanistan or Iraq, and as neocons want to do today, given what's going on, it seems that one obvious possible, or maybe one of the possible explanations where there's not been an immediate regime change is because there's a much stronger middle class who are actually a bit too comfortable. Am I right or wrong?
No, it's not comfortable. It's scared. And as I said from the beginning, the Iranian culture have never been revolutionary, unlike the Arabs or others. You shoot a couple of them at a protest, everybody runs away. Again, I'm not insulting them; they're human. Half of them will flee the country, become refugees. They go to Turkey or whatever. The other half will just stay quiet because they know what happens. if they even arrest you, they torture you, and it's rough. So, but in recent years, especially 2022, 2023, we did see a different wave where people didn't really care anymore. There was a moment where they had nothing to lose. So people got a little bit optimistic when Mahsa Amini was killed by the IRGC for not being modest enough. But even that, eventually the regime won the crackdown, because even though we were thinking, oh, this could be it, but we forget that while the regime have smaller numbers, they are vicious. And at the time, and there is evidence for this, during those protests at the time, they used to bring in proxies, Hezbollah members, and other allies from essentially the Arab Islamists to come to the streets and beat up the people, because they knew that those guys have no sympathy towards the Iranian people. And the evidence has always been out there with videos of those people speak Arabic when they're chasing down the Iranian people. So, but they've lost the proxy.
So these are Arabs, these are Arabs living in Iran.
Well, no, they bring them in probably from Syria or Lebanon. Of course, these are like...
there is an Arab population in Iran.
Yeah, but they're not Islamists. There's a small chunk in the south of Iran who are Arab. They're just normal people. But these are the actual proxies of the IRGC, the Hezbollah members and the Hezbollah of Iraq and the Syria Shia militias who are now, I don't know where they are because, of course, Assad is gone. So they used to come to Iran to help the regime because some of the own police officers on the street didn't want to beat up their own people anymore. But that's gone now because the proxies have been completely destroyed, almost basically by the IDF. So they now struggle. So all the intel I'm getting from Iran is that they have right now, as we speak, checkpoints everywhere. It's literally like the 1979, just post the revolution, where it was basically a war zone where they had to basically make sure everybody who was pro-Shah is arrested and taken out. It's like that again, but they are struggling with the checkpoints. The intel that I'm getting, at least, is that they don't have enough people. They have to keep moving people around from the checkpoints on the streets. Like 4 people here, okay, move 2 of them, 3 of them come back. That other checkpoint is now empty, but they have guns, and people are terrified. But as of today, which is obviously filming, it's the beginning of July, some protests have started.
Have they?
Some, and we have to be objective. And this is primarily at funerals for the Iranians who've been killed. One thing that the media is not talking about.
So not the IRGC or the Quds members or the nuclear. We're talking about civilians who have been
civilians. One thing the media has not covered since the so-called ceasefire is that over 700 dual nationals and foreign nationals have been arrested. 6
because they're dual and foreign nationals.
Well, because apparently they're spies. That's right. the accusation. And 6 of them so far have been executed as we speak now.
6 have been executed.
Already,
do you know what nationality they are?
A couple of them were dual nationals, German, American, and I wouldn't know the others, unfortunately, but they would be probably British or something.
Well, that's interesting. So an American's been killed and possibly Brits have been killed.
And the issue is, this is the number that we do know officially, over 700 people. With that, I don't have the exact number, but I can easily tell you that hundreds more or a couple of thousand more of normal Iranians have also been arrested and being tortured. So people are being killed right now, and people are now having their funerals, but the media is not talking about this because since the ceasefire, they're not really covering anything that's happening inside Iran, and they're getting away with everything. They're just going around slaughtering everybody because they're trying to find the Mossad agents. And there are Mossad agents, obviously, because, again, as by the time we're speaking now, the mysterious attacks are still happening at IRGC sites and buildings. Explosions. No one's taking responsibility. The assumption might be that, it could be Mossad operatives with the drones that they have, because there's still some of them left, but could be anti-IRGC Iranians. It's some members of the armed forces, who are different to the IRGC, have said to have defected. Not publicly, obviously, but quietly. So we don't know who's doing the attack. We know there are attacks on the IRGC, and we know normal people are being arrested, tortured, and killed. So there are funerals, and we have just received a couple of videos of some of the funerals where people stop because everybody is together because of the funeral. They become confident and they start chanting and protesting. It's the initial gathering of the crowd which is difficult in Iran because there are checkpoints everywhere. In this country, in the West, you just have to stop bringing in a couple of people with signs, and then the others will join them, and then that's a protest. And you could call them or could do a WhatsApp group, 4 p.m. outside Parliament. In Iran, you can't do that. They're checking everything. So it has to be a spontaneous moment where everybody's together and they look at each other. Can we start chanting now? So the fact that they're just doing it at their funerals, they kind of, I think, know that the regime are not going to do anything because the regime want them to get it out of the system. You're at the funeral over there, do your chants. We keep an eye on you, but you can do that. Just don't come on the street now. Just do your chants, get it out of your system. That's how the regime has been in place all this time.
And is that maybe combined with the fact that they're somewhat thin after Operation Rising Lion? It'd be worth to get your take on how damaging Rising Lion was in a few metrics. Obviously, the nuclear aspect, which is the stated aim of the war. As we've just, it's been reported this morning, the Pentagon, after there was one report that it only set back around 2 months. The Pentagon now say it's been set back 1 or 2 years. Then there's, of course, militarily how much they've been set back. It seems that they were set back in terms of their air force pretty dramatically in 2024 with the two sets of conflict in April and then later October, November with Israel. But if you're following this war, it's like, oh my gosh, they're significantly behind militarily. They didn't, any of the things that we feared that they might have, any of the, I can't remember what, they had crazy names, some of these ballistic missiles they had. But it didn't seem that they had worse than a Khyber missile or an Emad missile, which are horrific, terrible missiles, but they could have had worse.
Cluster bombs inside.
The cluster bomb. They did use a cluster bomb. At least one.
Yeah, we saw the evidence on the walls in Israel.
So I'd like to, and then there's the actual, how much has been done to the regime itself. So the IRGC, the Kurds, like how much is a setback? Obviously, the Ayatollah has been kept alive, spared. Trump said he could take him out.
Still in a bunker.
Still in a bunker. What's your analysis of how much damage was done by Operation Rising Lion?
I think firstly, we have to talk about the perception of the Iranian people. Again, I don't want to speak on behalf of all the Iranian people because a chunk who would feel like this. I think a lot of them, including people like my dad, who got a little bit excited, Israel is finally doing this. I think Israel being pulled away towards the end when they were being successful, I think it's kind of emotionally and psychologically affected people. Even those who were basically against the regime in Iran, they're like, oh, you didn't finish the job. Why? We were winning. So there is that to deal with because Israel, they saw Israel and the narrative from the Israeli government came across as slightly more robust, slightly more transparent than the American side. When the operation started by the IDF and the IAF, they basically didn't really talk much about the nuclear thing. They said, we want to eliminate the threat from the IRGC. They didn't really say regime change, but they basically said, well, our problem, the problem for President Trump is different. They just don't want Iran to have nuclear. Fine. Our problem is different because they are the godfather of terrorism and Islamism. They've got proxies next to us. We now have to go to the head of the octopus. So that's how they saw it. And they were taking out everybody. And the air defense system was completely destroyed, basically weakened. All the regime people had to go into hiding. And I think, again, we don't know exactly what sort of conversations happened in Washington and in Jerusalem, for example. But there must be a reason why that had to happen. Because I think maybe if Israel had continued, it would have actually resulted in regime change. And this is my just opinion. And then regime change would have been blamed on Israel or the West. It's not a good look, especially after what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Perhaps that might be the reason. Because there's no reason, if you're winning, why you should stop. If they were struggling, then that makes sense.
Let's just dig into what it is exactly to be winning. Because I think there's a very good, from both the Israel point of view, the American point of view, and the Iranian anti-regime point of view, that the allied Western forces should not be involved in regime change. And one obvious example would be that if whatever the next regime is, even if it's popular within Iran and even if it's pro or sympathetic towards Israel and the West and wants good, peaceful trading relations, etc., if the hand of Mossad or Israeli IDF, Israel, or the hand of America was in any way involved in regime change, it would undermine its legitimacy, even if there was a minority within Iran against it. So in a sense, that's a good thing, right? So when you say your father is unhappy that they didn't finish the job, what more did he expect?
So my father is like me. So we neither of us agree that Israel or America or anybody should directly be involved with regime change, because with the reasons you mentioned as well. But They know that they can't finish the job on their own, people in Iran. They wanted, essentially, Israel, not America, it will be a different thing, but Israel and Iran, Israel and the Islamic Republic have been sworn enemies for decades. It will make sense if one of them kills the other one. It's not like America, like going to liberate the Iraqis. So they kind of wanted, or I kind of wanted, for example, to finish the job, as in just take out the IRGC, but you don't have to be involved in the regime change, like supporting anybody or going to Iran, saying with Israeli flags, we are here to free you. Don't do that, but just weaken them towards the end, and then of course people can finish it. And I think that, again, everything goes back to what's been going on with the regime themselves, because the supreme leader is still alive, and while there was no army, nobody knew who was in charge. Even right now, no one knows really who's in charge. People walk around the streets, inflation is going up. No one knows, wait, is the president still in charge? The president was always a puppet anyway. Where's the supreme leader? We can just see a couple of soldiers with guns on the streets, but there's no unity. Like, everything's just falling apart. But you can't have a direct regime change because it's a bad look. But there won't be any other regime replacing this regime. Iran and the Iranian people over the last few years, slowly, they've evolved. They don't want a regime. They just want to be a normal country. And it's interesting when it comes to the third world, we always say regime. Oh, this regime or the next one. We won't say it when it comes to the US, when it comes to the UK. We just say we're becoming democratic. In 1774, for example.
Is that not implicit in the regime? Regime change is like, oh, we want a democratic regime. But
it's still a regime. Do you call what we have here a regime, for example? Or a better example in the US is we don't say regime. We just say government. It's a system. We say system. We say system.
We do. But detractors of the West, detractors of Israel, will say regime.
Oh, no, of course. But when we say regime when it comes to the Middle East, it comes across as a new group of people in charge. It could be democratic, but a group of people, a new people in charge. That's the new face. So like Al-Jilani, for example. It could turn Syria into a democracy tomorrow, but we will still say that's an Al-Jilani regime because he's in charge. But if the Iranians just simply want what the Americans got in 1700s, go back to what Iran used to be. You don't have to have, like, for example, Shah, but part of the thing that they had in the early 20th century, Iran was the first country in the Middle East to introduce constitutional monarchy, as in parliamentary democracy. So it's not about the monarchy part of it, it's about the constitution. They want to bring back the constitution, not necessarily the monarchy, just the parliamentary democracy. Right. They simply want to be like, okay, we'll decide on the head of state, because the consensus now is we have to have a transition government anyway. Have a referendum on what system we decide. Of course, the pro-monarchy people want to push constitutional monarchy, not dictatorship, sort of like the UK. Constitutional monarchy, they want to push for that. But there's still a big chunk of people in Iran for very different reasons. They won't like it. Some, they will associate it with the previous Shah. Some, just like people in the West, if you ask a normal young person, here's a new country that you're going to create. Would you like to have monarchy? Like, no, because you can't compute. Monarchy is a very traditional thing compared to the modern world. So, it could be a presidential, it could be a republic, or it could be a
constitutional monarchy.
Yes. Or it could be like a German style, a federal system with basically a fake president. But they know they just want a normal democracy.
Is one of the problems they have that there aren't any obvious leaders? Or the way you spell it out there is more like
you don't need a leader.
They don't want a leader. They want an actual system change.
Yes.
Right. But it seems to me, if you look at politics through history, even today, actually it's charismatic leaders that bring about system change. And then I look, and who are the possible new system changers? Well, the Ayatollah has named 3 possible successors. Ayatollah Khamenei is said to be, or there's rumors that he's very unwell in his bunker. I imagine he's been under some stress. And then the name we keep hearing is Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Now, I'd love to, let's start, before we get to Pahlavi, what do you know about these 3 successors of the Ayatollah? One of them is the son, right?
It's not going to be him. Even if the regime survives somehow and Khamenei dies, Mujtaba Khamenei becoming supreme leader is going to create more infighting at the top of the regime. He's not liked by anybody, and they see it as nepotism. They see it as like he's the Prince Harry of of the Islamic Republic, like more like Prince Andrew actually. Keep him away. He's a weird guy. Yeah, and then the other two. I mean, Larijani has always been close to his family, been like a very influential family. But so he will be supported by most of the IRGC. But that's not even on the table. From my opinion, the moment the supreme leader dies, however dies, could just get a flu and dies, get COVID, monkeypox, then it's over. It not instantly, perhaps not instantly, but that will cause first the infighting at the top. Then, of course, it could either provoke Israel to come back with an excuse to finish the job, or the Iranian people or the military that we keep hearing they've been defecting, apparently. They might actually do something eventually. So,
what's the relationship between the military and the Ayatollah?
So it's an interesting one. It's not a normal country. Why? Well, they were quite ingenious. What they did was in '79, they took control of the military. Cool, but they were like, we're going to set up our own paramilitary, the IRGC, and they are the Guardian, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, and they will be connected to the Supreme Leader's office. The Supreme Leader was supposed to be, technically on paper, initially, the first leader, Khomeini, was supposed to be more like a pope. It was supposed to be a spiritual leader, a head of state, but, quiet. But in reality, obviously, that wasn't the case. So the IRGC is there to, on behalf of the Supreme Leader, who's actually in charge of the country. It's basically an ongoing paramilitary coup that's taking place. They are the real military. But the actual military, the armed forces, like any other normal country, it attracts people who care about the country. They join it. And obviously, on paper, you have to show your allegiance towards the regime. But there will be many who just care, or there's nerds who want to be in armed forces. Some people just like it. And there are those who, IRGC, you join voluntarily, or connections, right? No one's forcing you to become IRGC. If you are part of IRGC, you are a believer. Whereas obviously the armed forces, you could just fall into the career, because obviously everybody has to serve for a couple of years. When you're 18, you might join it. Well,
They have conscription there.
Yeah, and I like to be a pilot. So then that's just the military. Whereas so it could be anybody. It could be someone who's pro-regime, could be armed forces. Someone who could be, I don't care about politics, could be armed forces. And
would an equivalent be, let's say, if you're an American and you might have voted Democrat, but you're still part of the military because you're a patriot? Is it the same? Is that the same idea?
Kind of, obviously, the different system. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to be necessarily pro-IRGC. I mean, publicly, you have to say I'm pro-IRGC, otherwise they kick you out. But you can't protest. You can't say, hey, I'm part of the army and I hate the IRGC. Everybody has to be pro-IRGC, technically.
And presumably they probably are literally as well, right? It would take quite something to be part of a military of a regime that you were against.
Yes.
But particularly a theocratic,
that is a good
fanatical
But
regime.
then if I get conspiracy, going with conspiracy theories, which is kind of, again, instinct, but with what we've been seeing, the changes in the last 10 years or so, 10, 15 years, when you talk to people who know the Crown Prince's team, and it seems like the last, 7, 8 years, you started randomly hearing people chanting his name on the streets in Iran, or like graffitis. That was never the case 20 years ago. Even when people were protesting against the regime, they weren't doing that. When we started seeing those changes, well, instinct was, like I said, these guys have been working behind the scenes slowly. The Crown Prince, for example, we didn't hear anything for like 30 years, but 40 years. And now their campaign is working relatively to kind of feed the idea of the Crown Prince, right? And then that's the same period of time when we start hearing that the idea that all armed forces, some people are just patriots. I think perhaps if we go with that theory with no evidence, people maybe realize the last 10, 15 years that this regime is all over the place anyway. If I really care, I'm going to get involved, going to join the armed forces, just in case, if there's an opportunity at the end. Again, we have no evidence. I haven't talked to anybody who's like, yeah, I did that 15 years ago. I did it on purpose.
Right.
But it seems like the air has changed. 30 years ago, nobody would have joined the armed forces unless you were the lover of the supreme leader. But I don't know. It's something has changed, but people are still terrified. And I think people in Iran have also been sort of like, I don't know, for those who've been following British politics for years after 2016, People were saying we're going to leave the EU, Brexit's happening, and then even pro-Brexiteers are saying it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They basically lost that kind of the belief that it's going to happen. I think for years and years and years in Iran, there's always this optimism. Oh, it's going to happen now. Protests, uprising, and I think right now, especially when the IDF stopped, one of the reasons is just people's morale is just completely been destroyed again. And while they have nothing to lose and their lives are now terrible economically, I think that they're just completely gone what I would call Middle Eastern, which is that those cultures are very goes towards. It's sort of like the Russian cultures. They go back to depression and just a little bit of misery, whereas they're very, very different to the Americanism that they created the 1700s and 1774, and they still have it.
Well, particularly if they don't have anything to rally behind, which it sounds like even if they did, it would be quite difficult to.
Yeah.
I already have mentioned Pahlavi. I want to talk about him. Now, I'm going to be honest. I've been extremely unimpressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I saw the Operation Rising Lion break out, and immediately he's being interviewed and he's putting out videos from his gilded palace over in Virginia or DC or wherever he might be in the States. And I just thought, what the fuck are you doing over there? Get yourself, if you can't get to Iran, get to Azerbaijan, get to the border, and at least act like a leader.
Yeah. And
you can't expect people to support you when you're quite literally on the other side of the globe. You're not putting your neck on the line. You're not risking anything. That's not going to elicit the kind of admiration and support you want from.
That's not
from
what George Washington would have done.
It's not what George Washington would have done. It's not what Churchill or Napoleon would have done. They get out there. Leaders do that. And so I actually have been incredibly disappointed by him. Yeah. And I wanted to know whether you think I'm right or wrong to think that way.
Yeah, well, relatively I know the guy, and I've met him and he's been on my channel and I've spoken to his team, and especially over the last few days, few weeks, I thought even when the operation was happening in Iran, I kind of wanted to, like, if I were closer to him, I could have said, at least the beginning, at least do more videos at first. Just do more videos the first day, couple of days. Not like a video once every couple of days, but in a suit and a tie. Just, at first, it's just about PR at the beginning, but then you need real action. Just in your t-shirt with the selfie, just like something. But also just more robust. Patrick Bet-David, who also had him on his podcast a couple of times, was attacked because he's actually Iranian, his background, Patrick. He got attacked by Iranians because he went, like you, but more robust recently when the whole thing was happening. And he said, Reza Pahlavi still cannot directly say what he wants. He's still saying, if people want me, it depends on what people want. I'm here to serve. Like, tell people whether you want to be king, whether you want to be a sort of Gandhi figure or anybody. Just tell them what you are, and then they can decide if they want it or not.
Tell them what your vision is for the country.
And so what you say can't happen because he has to first decide if he wants to be that character, the George Washington character. If he says, I want to be that revolutionary leader, then yes, go to the border, right? For example. At this point, I would have probably just said, just get on the plane. I'm going to Iran. I don't care. Because that's what Khomeini did, obviously from Paris. He was like, I'm going there. And they thought on the plane that they're going to get shot down by the Shah's.
Well, Khomeini showed a hell of a lot more courage than Pahlavi so far. Although by the time we publish this video, maybe it's the case that he just came through London, so he seems to be going in the right direction at least.
He's making more efforts now in terms of rallying the troops in the West, because I think it's also been the international community and governments, politicians who didn't know what is the alternative, and people have been terrified. Like, what is the alternative? What's going to happen? Is it going to be a power vacuum? There won't be a power vacuum. But whatever we say about Reza Pahlavi right now, criticizing, there is a bit of a consensus. Not every Iranian that they would like to just rally behind. If he says rally behind me, they would, at least as just the revolutionary leader, not necessarily as a future king. They would, because there's nobody else. The only alternative, which they think it is the Mujahideen, who are a bunch of Islamist communists who have been very good at lobbying our politicians in the UK, in the US. We've got people, grown-ups, that we were like, you're a good politician, for example, or at least you're a smart person, like Mike Pompeo. Like, you're a smart person. I could disagree with what you say on some issues, but you're supposed to be a smart politician. He's a supporter of the MEK, Mujahideen, and we've had here Tory MPs, a number of them.
Pompeo is a supporter of the MEK.
Yeah, And because the MEK have been going around for the past few years saying we've reformed ourselves. They used to be an actual cult. Like, they were doing forced marriages to keep inside the cult, Islamic, communists, actually Marxists. But they're saying we're not Islamists anymore. Fine. But firstly, they're still culturally Islamic, and it's a bit of an off-putting thing for Iranian people. They don't want anything to do with any sort of religion. Like, if you say I'm religious, even if you come out right now and say I'm a practicing Orthodox Jew, I will be your leader. Like, no, go away. They just want complete secularism. But that's not the problem that they have with the MEK people in Iran. They are a cult who are Marxists. And then we got Mike Pompeo, we got Bob Blackman here, and we got many, or a few.
Who's Bob Blackman?
A Tory MP. I'm pretty sure he's still an MP, but they've been supporting them because they fell for the trap. And then people are saying they might have been paid. I'm like, yeah, you could pay MPs, but not enough to. Like, what are you going to give them? Like £10,000 support? I don't think it's the money that makes these politicians support MEK. I think they're being very good at manipulation. Then we are the opposition. Nobody takes them seriously. But anyway, they don't really matter, despite if they hang out with Mike Pompeo and others. There is only basically one alternative to rally behind, but the alternative is not regime. It's just a system. But right now, again, if people are watching this weeks from now, months from now, maybe everything's completely changed.
Yeah. So look, there's a few other issues I want to get into, but I feel that there's a couple of topics that we haven't quite finished. One is what's going on with your father.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that obviously that he's happy or was almost happy by what's happening, but also he's been arrested but not arrested, or he's being supervised, or what exactly is going on with your father?
So, to be fair, I've kind of mentioned my father quite a bit on my channel and on social media a little bit, and I tend to be quite strong about it. But it's when I think about it properly, it's I haven't seen him in years, so probably about 20 years almost, and despite everything, he got arrested a couple of times for having a satellite dish, because satellite dish, you get foreign TV, like they used to arrest you for that. And then they took his passport away. They keep an eye on you. They don't have enough space in political prisons anymore. So as long as you keep your head down, they're fine. His life, he was starting to believe just before the war started that we're probably never going to see each other again. But then we got excited, up to a point where I thought he was going to come to the wedding. Now, as things stand, I've lost more hope than even before. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, while I told you that we thought we're never going to see each other again, we always had optimism, both him and myself, that we kind of had a feeling the regime will change. Now, worse than ever, the feeling that I can't even lie to myself that there is optimism. And like, realistically, logically, I think the regime could go. But I don't have the energy to tell myself that, just like I told you about the Iranian people. And it's not about me just missing him. It's I can feel the pain on his behalf, what he's feeling finally, as I'm becoming a bit older now. When you're a younger son, you just bury your head in the sand. And now I've been told by his brother, his wife, he's ruined, because I'm his only son, and it doesn't have anything else, and it's become it's sort of like the mourning a death to a point.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And this is precisely because of what's happening at the moment. This is really very fresh then, dude. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
So are other members of the family also in similar trouble?
No, I mean, there's everybody keeps their head down. I've got just a few family members there, so like my uncle, aunts, but no, they're fine. Well, not fine because they're under occupation, but they live their lives. I mean, the biggest problem for everybody, including people I know, is just life. It's not about the Islamic dictatorship. It's just life. Like, I was talking to my dad, who was saying the night before, for example, chicken, if a whole chicken was, for example, £10. The next morning he went to the shop, it was £20. Like it changes that quickly, and it keeps just going up and up and up, and they can't afford anything anymore. But on the surface, it looks like a normal country. It's turning into Venezuela.
Are you able to FaceTime him?
Yeah, so
I know they had internet dropouts, didn't they?
Yeah, but we can't communicate via multiple VPNs. He has to go through and encrypted apps like WhatsApp. Yeah,
and Starlinks.
Yeah,
possibly.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have contact, but it's
not all the time. There's a couple of minutes, few minutes each day that we get access.
And this is specifically because they have his passport, so he can't.
Wait, no, that part is just affects everybody right now. That they're controlling the communications, but yeah, I mean, generally speaking, because of my position, it's probably best not to have a conversation on a normal phone that could easily be tapped, for example.
I appreciate that we're flirting through the incredibly personal and then the geopolitical simultaneously. So, and forgive me if any of my question is insensitive, but given that it seemed that we were so close to serious damage. Well, there's been serious damage done to the IRGC and the regime. That we will agree, and the IRGC won't admit it publicly. They say they won the conflict, but would you mind articulating why exactly you've become so hopeful?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the same conversation, you've also described how there's a possibility of movement and from the people. How can you square that?
Right now, there's two sides of my brain. If you just ask me just objectively, losing my logic, my answer right now, people might watch this 2 years from now, that I don't see any way for the regime to come back or thrive. There's no way, based on everything that we know, and based on everything I know about the way that regime works on a normal day, on a healthy day, the way the control works, they've lost all that. So it is inevitable that it will end. Now, the worry that some people watching this would have in the West is, okay, it will end. What is the alternative? The conversations that we had, what's going to happen after? My worry is it's so difficult to see these guys end. Even the logic says there's no way they can come back as winners. But what will happen to Iran? Because they're not going to give up and go. How long do we have to wait for some sort of, whether you want to call it a civil war, whether you wanted to call it some sort of a power vacuum created by themselves while they're still there? It's going to be very messy. And this is why you don't really want Western boots on the ground. It's too messy. They're not just, a lot of them are cowards. They will escape. But they have infected the culture. They brainwash a lot of the young kids when they grew up in their families to become martyrs, for example. And how do we clean that up? That's the fear. The Shah, because it was just one figurehead, he leaves, the system falls. Even you could say something about Assad. Assad was a figurehead of a system, not some sort of ideological figurehead. You take him out, the system falls. At this point, you can make the same argument about Putin, because he's been leader in Russia for such a long time that it seems like the system is Putin. Putin is the system. Yeah. If he had left, I don't know, in 2004, actually he did leave for a bit, but the first term, you could just replace him with a different Putin. But these guys are different. Yes. They've infected the culture to a point like Gaza, but differently. Gaza was a complete mess culturally, so you just infected Hamas, and then future generations will be basically brainwashed. Because without insulting everybody from Gaza, they didn't have that rich heritage of culture to rally behind something else, their history. Whereas obviously the Iranians they still have this pride, where if you manage to successfully infect that society since 1979 and brainwash a chunk of them, that is impressive. Mm-hmm. It's like hypothetically, imagine the Nazis win in 1944-45, and then people always joke that, we could be speaking German. Not really. They could enforce it as some sort of international language, but it will be very difficult for the Germans, for Nazi Germany, to come in the 40s and the 50s and 60s to completely change the behavior of the Brits, the British working classes. Mm-hmm. And if they manage to do it, it will be impressive. So that's how it's impressive what the RRGC did in an evil way. And then, of course, the Iranians, they have this pride, where if you manage to successfully infect that society since 1979 and brainwash a chunk of them, that is impressive. So yeah, I'm just worried about those guys. How do you clean that up?
Yeah. So the picture you're painting is actually the situation is incredibly fragile for either the Iranians, but even the Israelis and Americans to claim some sort of victory. At this point, I'm not getting the impression at all that you feel there's any sort of victory.
No.
Is there anything redeeming about Operation Rising Lion for you?
I think it's still done its job to a point where it's definitely created instability at the top. Again, we're not there in the meeting rooms with the IRGC, but it still feels like no one's in charge. We hear rumors. I don't really work based on rumors anyway, but rumors give you kind of some sort of indication that rumors about, for example, some of the people at the top don't like the new replacements because obviously they have to replace all the generals. And they're not taking orders or this one. Obviously, that's always going to happen. The battle of egos. We have it in British politics. The political right is completely messed up because I don't want that leader. I want this one. I want that one. Imagine the tensions in an Islamic dictatorship. So obviously, if you have this issue between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, imagine Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage in an Islamic dictatorship. imagine the tensions there. This is democracy, and so clearly there are issues. So the operation by the Israelis have done something. It's just that nothing is happening. It's been again a couple of weeks, right? But I think I see it as a good thing. So we haven't actually seen a return of the regime, return of the empire, but we haven't seen the victory from the anti-regime. We won. It's sort of like a stalemate right now. It's sort of like pending.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to wait to see which one will come out and say we won.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what they self-identify as.
Yes.
Who's going to come back and take control again?
Mm-hmm.
No one's in control right now. Not the Iranian people, not the regime.
Do you think from the point of view of Israel and America, well, I would make the case that not only, if it is true that their nuclear program has been set back 2 years,
Sure.
and it is true that at least 30 of the high command have been taken out, the IRGC, the nuclear program, nuclear scientists, as well as Quds forces, it does seem to me that they might not have killed the head, decapitated the head of the octopus.
Yes.
But they have seriously retarded that octopus.
Yes.
They have seriously set it back. So in that point of view, even if it's kicking it down the road a couple of years, from the point of view of Israel and America, it has been...
It's a win.
It's a win.
It is a win. But from a perspective of the Israelis, I agree with them more. The nuclear thing, it could always be an issue. I'm not complacent about the nuclear threat, but I don't think the Iranian regime's biggest problem for us is the nuclear ambitions. It's the existence of the IRGs. And the Israelis get it because they are in the region and right next door to them, the proxies are there. For President Trump, the biggest issue will be the nuclear thing, which is fine. Worry about that. I'm not saying they don't care about nuclear. Oh, yeah, if they could, they will build it right now and bomb you out of desperation. But for people like myself and for Israelis, the existence of the IRGs is a problem. So, yes, it's still a win.
Okay.
Overall, it's still a win.
I want to ask, seeing as we're British and in Britain, just about the British point of view. Obviously, they were excluded from even knowing about Operation Rising Lion, even though they were part of the 2024 operations with Israel against Iran. That was called Operation True Promise. They have been excluded because they're no longer trusted by Israel. But it seems to me that it is in the British interest, and the establishment seem to be happy about the war and the way it's been executed, in that they do consider Iran or the regime an enemy of the state. But I just wanted to hammer down on this a little bit, because it was revealed that MI5 had foiled at least 15 plots by Iran on British soil against, I mean assassination plots when I say this, British citizens or British nationals here. And then the most famous example is from 1989, the end of Khomeini's reign, and he puts a fatwa onto Salman Rushdie, who, of course, 3 years ago in upstate New York, there was an attempt on his life and he was blinded in one eye by it. I just wondered how you would colour in the threat of Iran to Britain, and whether it seems to me that most Brits probably don't appreciate the threat to Iran to themselves. What's your take?
I don't think the British state understand it either. I don't know how I feel about the establishment in Britain, because I've always been a believer that even post British Empire, we became a soft power. But I think for the first few decades, we're still basically, as they will call it, the enemies will call it, running the show in the back behind the scenes. But at least, then we became, even if we became just partners with the US, and then maybe we're behind the US, but we're still, okay, even if we're not leading the world, I thought the Foreign Office and the Palace, this is what we call the deep state. This is just a state in this country. We don't have deep state, it's just a state. I thought that, I would still like to believe that they are still, in a very evil, genius way, they're still like, they know what's going on. Everything that we are seeing, the decisions from politicians to civil servants, makes no sense. It feels like this country, it's not just weak. I don't think it knows what it wants. Why can't Britain designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization like Canada under Trudeau and America, for example? So some might say, oh, well, the fear of backlash. Well, Canadians should have had a bigger fear, because Canada was completely infested by the IRGC.
How so?
A lot of them, they still see it as a safe haven. If the regime falls, they're going to go to Canada. They've sent their families.
No way.
London and Canada are the two main places they're going to go. So, and Canada decided to do a crackdown on it.
Wait, why are they going to come back to? Why are they going to come to London?
So London has always been historically the safe haven for all the
Persians
outcasts.
like yourself.
No, just outcasts and nutters of the world. Karl Marx and basically all the weirdos. We just brought them here. So it's always been the same. So you had the Bin Laden family here. You had like the Assad family here. It's something about London, I guess. It's something I don't know.
Oh dear.
I know. Yeah. So the IRGC decided to send their kids to London a while ago, ages ago. They all these like young boys and girls of the sons of the IRGC leaders, they are now clubbing in Mayfair, in the Annabelle's Members Club especially. They're there doing drugs, doing drinks. There's nothing illegal about drugs, but as in they're not doing any terrorism. They're having a great time. They're living as Westerners. Their dads are killing the Iranian people. They did the same thing with Canada. Not really sure how they ended up there or what decision was. I think, I know why. Canada and Germany in the 90s and 2000s were more liberal when it came to immigration, more than now, for people to go there and to have an opportunity to work. So a lot of the Iranians, or so-called Iranians, like IRGC Iranians, went to Canada. Also because English speaking in Iran, people learn English as a kid. Germany, a little bit difficult. Germany is full of anti-IRGC Iranians, but Canada just became like a new America for the IRGC people. They speak English, we can go there, it's a big country. But they always knew that they have to have some sort of backup option. So, and then they're not stupid. They're very greedy. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to have to end up going to Cuba. They don't want to go to Cuba. They want to go somewhere prosperous.
Yeah, prosperous.
So, and why is it that British state? And we've heard that GCHQ and MI5 have been very busy with a massive watch list of thousands of people on this extremism list, and all these plots and everything else. Yet, not only we're not designating the IRGC, Britain still has this weird relationship with Iran. You said enemy. I don't think they see each other as enemy. Oh, Iran sees Britain as an enemy publicly, but they
do. They say death to Britain.
Yeah,
but their chance when they've got time, where they're not shouting.
But the British government,
government
has always been very, very diplomatic. The British government never fought against the Iranian government, even when the IRGC attacked the British embassy 5-6 years ago, whenever it was, and then they had to close it down for a while. Then we reopened it. Everything went back to normal. I don't know what's going on with the British state. I can't really insult them and say you've been taken over. I don't think it's that. But have we gone stupid? I cannot believe that's the case, because the people in the palace who are still part of the Windsor family, if you call it that, they're still the same people. From a few decades ago. And Foreign Office, you can't just instantly do a DEI hiring and have all these new civil servants. Surely you still have the grown-ups in the room, or at least the new grown-ups who were hired by the previous grown-ups 10, 20 years ago. Are we still actually not just running the show, like running the world, but are we actually taking care of our country? It doesn't seem to be.
Yes, I don't suspect the current Labour government have much of a clue what's going on. Listening to you speak there, I think what a comparison of countries where in Britain the scions of the Ayatollah are enjoying the high life, whereas back in Iran, a law-abiding man who happens to be against the regime, referring to your father here, is having hell in his own country, and that just tells you that all the difference you need to know between the two countries and the two civilizations. I would ask you more about all that's going on, but I suspect by the time we publish, it'll be a new story. I recommend all listeners go over to Tousi TV to follow. This has to be, as far as I'm concerned, the most up-to-date in the West. If you want to get the most details about what's actually going on in Iran, you're way ahead of the mainstream media. I'd like to ask you where you're getting the information from, but I suspect that will open up a can of worms. But
People will die.
yeah, quite. Suffice to say, listeners, viewers must go over to Tousi TV if they want to follow what's going on in Iran. But where exactly will they find Tousi TV and your work?
So, of course, on YouTube, it's just Tousi TV, Tousi TV. But we also have our own independent platform, Tousi.tv. And you can also download the Tousi TV app. You get access to all the live shows, but also documentaries that we're making and interviews. And we actually had an interview recently with yourself as well, and everything else. So, yes, Tousi TV. Yeah.
Maya, a great pleasure to speak with you. There's a lot of topics we didn't cover. Perhaps we'll have to have another conversation and talk about more about the Middle East and Persia and all of that. But thank you so much, and I really greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching the Winston Marshall Show with Mahyar Tousi. If you want to support the show, remember, all you have to do is press subscribe. If you do that, I can have more phenomenal guests like Mahyar exploring the issues you want to hear about that the mainstream media won't touch. And if you head over to winstonmarshall.co.uk, you'll get exclusive content and ad-free viewing. But until next time, be well.